Welcome to The Third Story. I'm your host, Leo Sidran. Today's conversation features singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist Joey Dosik. I feel like every time I do one of these introductions with a member of the Vulf community, I kind of end up saying the same thing. If you know who this is, I don't have to tell you very much. You know what you're getting into today. It is one in a series of episodes that one listener referred to in a recent email that I received as The Search for Vulf. Joey Dosik is a member of Vulfpeck. In addition to his solo recordings, he's most well known for a series of videos and recordings that he has made with the collective unit helmed by Jack Stratton, known as Vulfpeck. I have, over the last year or so, had the chance to speak with Jack Stratton and other members of the Vulf scene, including Theo Katzman, Joe Dart, and most recently Corey Wong. And anytime I have a chance to talk to one of these folks, I do it. And I tell you that because part of what we're doing here is kind of triangulating the story that I've been getting from all the guys in the band that I've talked to about how it came together, what it means to them, how they see it relative to the rest of their careers, how it influences their careers, how their personal work influences the band, and I suppose to a large degree also how they see the phenomenon, the greater phenomenon of what they've achieved. To give you an idea of why I think it's significant right now, this is a group of musicians who came together at the University of Michigan with a somewhat irreverent and kind of punky approach, have managed to build enough of a following that with no label, essentially no management, completely self-regulated group that considers itself in many ways to be a side project for all of the members in it. They are, for example, playing Madison Square Garden this fall. So that's a big step forward for these guys, and it's also, I think, a real testament to what can be achieved in a very independent way with smart, creative people. So independent of the music that they're making, there's also this approach to the way that they're making it. But I do need to tell you that Joey is a fantastic singer and songwriter in his own right. He's also a great piano player, actually. And he's a good saxophone player, too. He, in our conversation, talks about his kind of on and off again love affair with the saxophone and how he manages that. But Joey wrote a couple of songs that came to kind of prominence because he recorded them with Vulfpeck. One of them is called Game Winner. And it's a song that combines his obvious love of basketball with the music and the love song. So his performing identity has brought together his love of basketball and his love of music, and we talk about that early on in the conversation, so I want to let you know about that. And he also has a song that he recorded with Vulfpeck called Running Away, which is a soulful, sweet, vintage kind of ballad. That's the thing about Joey, that he sounds like an old soul, and his music reflects that. His most recent record is called Inside Voice. I absolutely love it. It sounds rounded on the edges. You know, it's got that retro soul appeal. It's a kind of record you put on and light some candles, if you know what I'm saying. And hopefully you're not alone when you do. You can be alone if you want to when you light the candles, but you know, if you're accompanied by somebody that you really care about, or even a couple of people that you really care about, depending on the conditions of the event, Joey Dosik's Inside Voice will serve you well. But the thing about his writing is that although it's very classic and his approach is quite classic, there's something modern in it also. And in our conversation, we talked about that constant balance between deferring to the classics and entering into that world, swimming in those waters, but then trying to modernize or bring something new to it. And what is that thing? How does one do it? It's a good conversation. It's really one of these kind of free-range, freewheeling, radio-free conversations, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. Before I do, this is information that many of you know, but if you're new here, third-story.com is the place to go to sign up, subscribe, get involved, say hello, check all the socials, listen to past episodes, including the ones I mentioned earlier with Joey's pals, Jack Stratton, Theo Katzman, Joe Dart, and Corey Wong, or find other conversations with musicians, singers, songwriters, entrepreneurs, restaurateurs, technologists, actors, directors, members of the creative class. If you are feeling compelled after spending some time at Third Story headquarters, third-story.com, to get involved, to deepen your experience and your involvement with the podcast, then I welcome you to click the link or type directly into your browser, patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast. That's where you can go to make it official, put some skin in the game, cash in the chips, and become a truly engaged member of the Third Story community. Also, as I generally do. On the website, I have posted a Spotify playlist curated based on songs that we talked about in this conversation. And there's also some videos. I even found some pretty cool videos that go all the way back to the band that Joey was in college, My Dear Disco, which has come up quite a bit in these Vulf conversations because so many of the Vulf tribesmen came out of the band My Dear Disco. Was their college band in Michigan, but also some of his contemporary videos, some Vulf videos, just a kind of tasting menu of Joey Dosik. So without further ado, here it is, my conversation with the charming, talented, and tall Joey Dosik.
What was your session today?
I haven't been writing a lot of commercials, but in the last week or two, I got a couple things to write, and I was working on this version of a reggae song for a bank.
Wow. I mean, it's that green.
It's that green. It's that green that we're all trying to find.
I've gotten a couple commercial things in the past few years, and I'm sure you're very familiar with like the endless chase of the demos that you got to do and turn them in. Maybe you get a demo fee, maybe you don't. Maybe you get the gig, maybe you don't.
It's a lot like having a career in music, any part of having a career in music. I think when I started doing advertising, my expectation was, for whatever reason, the reputation was when you're ready to just cash in and start making that sweet advertising money, you just raise your hand and say, okay, I'm ready to do this, and then it would come to you. But it sort of turns out that it's as competitive as anything else.
Sure. What I've been trying to do to sort of deal with this like kind of eternal sense of disappointment that I keep getting from not getting the commercial is decide to then mute everything else but maybe like 3 elements from the track and write a new song over it.
Yeah.
And that's been like therapeutic.
Yes.
And I've got like a couple tracks that way now where I'm like, the drums are killing on this. I'm just going to write a new song over it. And then it's like a little bit of added soul protection, you know?
Well, we're going to salvage something here, right? Like we're going to take some kind of a death and make a new life out of it, or some kind of a loss and make a win out of it.
Absolutely.
And you are a person who can appreciate a win.
Sure.
I mean, I guess that's a pivot. But Joey Dosik, welcome to the house.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
As an outside observer, I think one notices a few things about you right away. One is that you're one of those kinds of singers that, you know, comes along very rarely. You just have the kind of voice that everybody wishes they could have and people want to hear. It's just as sweet and soulful, and, you know, you're gifted with this wonderful voice and you use it beautifully. And the other thing is you love sports. You love basketball particularly.
I mean, I'm just ready to hug you with all these things you're saying about me. No, I mean, I would love for someone who listens to my music to think all of those things, because, you know, I'm just kind of trying my best out here. But the way that basketball got folded into my musical life was unexpected and a huge blessing, because it just kind of allows me to be more of myself.
Yeah.
And in the end, that's just helpful on a human level, and it's helpful on an artist level also.
In what way?
For instance, this is going to be sort of a bit sideways maybe, but when I was recording my record, there were some tracks that I was working on with an amazing musician named Maki, and we were working on it, and like we kind of reached the end of the road on a track or something where we're just like, okay, what does this need? And he was like, I think this just needs more you in it. And what that ended up being was like more of a lo-fi approach with background vocals. And I almost attacked like 80% of the record that way. And it was just like more me on the record. And that's the thing that kind of took it over the finish line. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that could work on a musical level. It is also for me worked on, I don't want to say branding because that's stupid. Just like,
no, but it is a thing, an identity level.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
I think by claiming your love of basketball, writing a song about hitting the winning shot, talking about basketball a lot in your musical life, that you sort of don't have to keep these two passions separate, but somehow you allow everybody to just kind of know the full you or more of you rather than keeping them separate, which is an interesting thing. And I think that speaks to something that you and your cohort have experienced over and over again, which is the more process, the more experience you are willing to share or offer to the fans, the more they enter into your world, because you have become part of this scene that inspires a sort of fanaticism the people that dig you and dig Vulfpeck and dig a lot of the people that you're working with, they're fanatical about it.
I hear you. I think if you can find a universal message in that thing that is your identity somehow, that is the thing that people can relate to, whether or not they're feeling your pain or whether or not they have your same like Comic-Con level interest in the NBA and NBA gossip. Because it's like, for instance, last night at the show, usually when I play my song Game Winner, I will either during the song or before the song, I will make up almost like a new song on the spot about either a topical NBA subject, or if I'm in, like for instance, I was played in Brooklyn last night. So we're recording this on the eve of free agency. And so there's a lot of relevant basketball topics, especially with Brooklyn Nets versus New York Knicks. And so I went off into this world, and slowly it's like, okay, maybe half the people understand what I'm talking about. Then I get a little deeper, maybe 30%, then maybe 25%. And somehow in talking with my fans, maybe they're just very nice, is that they don't care that they don't understand always, because they're sort of like seeing me trance out into this thing, you know? And then if there is a way for me to bring it to a universal level, for instance, my dad always used to say that sports is a metaphor for life.
Yes.
You know? And so if there's a way to do that, either through explaining something about sports or writing a weird basketball love song somehow, you know, then that's something that everyone can relate to, no matter whether you're like listening to 8 basketball podcasts a day.
Well, I've heard even like with this podcast, sometimes people say to me that even if they don't understand, if I get really technical with somebody about recording or some geeky plug-in thing or whatever, you know, that they say, I don't know what you're talking about, but I just love hearing people who care about something that much talk about it.
I'm starting to care about that a lot too. I would love to pick your brain.
Geek out on that one too?
Honestly.
You know, when I hear your full-length album, Inside Voice, one of the things that I think immediately is that you achieved something that I think a lot of people have strived to do, which is you can't identify when it was made. There's nothing about it that says that a computer was involved in any way or that it's a contemporary record. Sounds old to me. I assume that's what you were going for.
Newsflash, a computer was involved. I appreciate that. That was the goal of the record. I guess that style of recording and I'll call it studio musicianship is the one that I've always sought after. The struggle always ends up being the blend between old and new.
Yes.
And how do I bring something modern into this fold?
I think that there's a sense of humor that's inside of your writing that you actually could kind of tune out a little bit and not catch. You know what I mean? And just think, this is some sweet, sexy, soulful music. But then there's something a little quirky about your writing that seems like maybe it's the modern twist.
Well, I'm glad that you picked up on that because, yes, that's the element that happened beyond Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And with this record, I really did do almost all of the songwriting away from the computer, not recording and writing simultaneously.
Yeah.
Which now I'm working on a bunch of music and I'm just getting antsy and I'm just like, let's start recording. Because recording is joy. Like writing to me is kind of painful. It's a painful process. And recording is just like the full joy expression. Yeah. Not that there aren't challenges that arise.
I completely relate to that. I read in maybe the press release for the record something where you said, you know, it was your intention that each of these songs could be performed solo at the piano, that you wanted to write them in that way. And I think that is the sign of a great song. But I also totally relate to that thing of like, I just want to track some drums. Like once we track drums, I'll feel better. You know?
Depends where the joy is, I think. You know, and for me with the record, the songwriting process was, even though it was painful, there was a certain joy in it. I was sort of in a really nice flow writing solo, and I was in a really nice flow writing with my friend Maki and learning so much from him too. And it was a really interesting period. While I was recording the record, I tore the ACL in my left knee. I made Game Winner EP in the middle of recording the record. I went through many different lives while making it.
Well, let's talk about your first original life, because I have to admit, I don't know much about where you come from or how you got here. So let's roll back a little bit here.
I came from the Smoothie Cafe right down the street.
I see that you did live in the smoothie life. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Northridge, California, which is in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles.
Yep.
So I claim Los Angeles. Typically, I'll just say I'm from Los Angeles, California, but we're going in depth right now.
We're going to go deep.
Exactly. My mom is a college professor and taught at CSUN, which is Cal State University Northridge, and we lived right near there. I grew up in a sort of suburban Los Angeles environment and was striving to always sneak away from it.
Where do you live now?
I live in Eagle Rock.
So you snuck away all the way to Eagle Rock.
I did.
From the San Fernando Valley, you made it all the way to Eagle Rock.
I did. Well, first I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yes.
Back to LA. I lived in Echo Park for about 7 years. Yeah, now I live in Eagle Rock, and it's funny. I never really conceptualized Eagle Rock as the burbs. It doesn't really feel like the burbs. It's kind of just this.
What's happening in Eagle Rock? Tell me I have not been to Eagle Rock.
Well, the whole east side of Los Angeles is going through we're past gentrification at this point. I don't know what past gentrification is called. Los Angeles has a deep history of segregation, and it was east of the LA River is Latino, south of the 10 freeway is African American, and over the last 25 years, I guess, there's just been the gentrification of this east part of Los Angeles. So these neighborhoods that were formerly Hispanic are now, have an influx of white people in these neighborhoods. Eagle Rock is a bit quirkier. Eagle Rock has this like hilly section with all kinds of massive homes, and then it has the flatter section. It's got smaller homes, and there's some conservative folks in there. It's undergone gentrification, but it's also kind of holding on to this weird, quirky little past.
And then there's a group of your friends and collaborators who are kind of all out there.
Yes, a lot of the music community is sort of continuing to move east into Highland Park.
Yeah.
Eagle Rock is Highland Park adjacent, let's say, but a bit quieter, a bit more sort of residential, and I don't want to say anonymous, but it's just a little different. It's not like bustling necessarily.
Good place to work, make music?
Yes, I'm living like this LA writer dream in a little cottage back house in my landlord's backyard, and I can make noise and record drums and play my piano and write and work on music, so it's great.
You said your dad told you that sports was a metaphor for life, so he was a big sports guy? My
dad was definitely involved in my love for sports and fostering that. We used to go to Laker games together. It was him and my godfather who kind of were Laker fans. It was a great time for basketball in LA. It was the mid-'80s, late 80s, early 90s. So Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah, I think my dad just tried to maintain a really healthy attitude. You'd see other kids like crying after games or throwing hissy fits or something. And he made a really conscious effort, and I appreciate this from him, to just let me know, like, this is just a game. This is about having fun, but also instilling qualities like don't quit. Like, you shouldn't quit. I remember there were times where I was pissed off at my coach or something. It's like, we're not quitters. We're not going to quit this. To persevere, And so those things, I think, teamwork, obviously, practice, I think those things are all pretty fundamental and foundational in life.
And when did music show up?
Music showed up at an early age, but after basketball. Basketball, I was dribbling basketball at 1.5 years old, and I was kind of fanatical about numbers, and like the sports page taught me how to do math. I was just like memorizing stats, looking at the standings every day. Music came when I was 5 years old. My sister was taking piano lessons, and I was like, what is this? I want to take piano lessons. Why does she get to do it? So I studied with Mrs. Cohen, who was like an 85-year-old Jewish grandmother who would come over to the house, and little 5-year-old me would sit down, and she would unpack Smarties, those like chalky candies, put them on the side of the piano, and I'd have to play something like a 5-finger exercise, and then I'd get one Smartie. It was like very, very old school.
Yep.
I would sort of compose / steal songs, and then
what were you listening to? What were you stealing?
Remember the movie Rudy? Speaking of sports, Rudy was this movie based on a true story, this underdog character from the University of Notre Dame.
Yes.
And he he was the equipment manager, and then he finally gets a jersey, and he gets into a game. And there's this movie theme that I think they then used for a million movies. It was like do 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 So whatever, I took that and I sort of like, I probably like added like one note and I called it like a sonata or something. And I sort of like stole it and wrote it out and recorded it. And I think my sister helped me record it on a little tape recorder. But I was also listening to music from the 50s, the Beatles, like stuff from my parents. My parents love classical music. My dad loves opera. So I was listening to Beethoven symphonies and catching like the overtures from operas and stuff like that. Like, I guess that's what I was listening to until, in middle school. Then I started to tune into pop radio, and I was getting stuff from my sister too, like Michael Jackson and like Alanis Morissette and stuff.
You started singing at some point. I mean, did that develop later, or where did that show up?
I just always loved to sing. My dad studied classical voice casually, sort of as his passion. My dad's a physician. I remember him practicing with his tapes and singing opera around the house. And I love to sing too. I love to sing like Little Richard and sing like Calendar Girl, like literally like mid-50s songs and stuff. The third grade talent show, I sang Tutti Frutti and I sang Hound Dog. But I didn't really take singing seriously until much, much later. Although I used to learn songs. I picked up the guitar in high school. I used to sit down with the Elton John songbook and learn, but I didn't really take it seriously. It was kind of my passion project as well, because I was kind of deep into this instrumental piano and then saxophone.
And then you
world.
started playing saxophone, yeah. So in high school, you were playing saxophone too.
I started playing when I was 10, and I was like, forget this piano. I don't care. My parents said, you need to study classical piano until you're done with high school. This is mandatory. Saxophone, you can do it, you can't do it, whatever. You don't have to do it, whatever. Yeah. I was pissed off about that. And look at me now, Mom and Dad. Thanks, Mom and Dad. It's my job.
You met my daughter on the way in, and I think to myself, like, man, this is like the stories like these that make you think you just got to dig in your heels and stand your ground with your kids, because kids will find a million reasons why they don't want to do something, or why they want to stop, or why they have a problem with something. And you just have to like choose those moments when you just insist.
I can't even begin to pretend like I know
you
what
agree,
that's
you
like.
know what I'm talking about?
You know, I like, I'm just going to sit here and be the student.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I will say that I'm thankful to my mom and dad because it is my job, I was on a jazz mission. I was on like this Ornette Coleman, John Coltrane, what is the next step for the saxophone or something like, and I went to college for it on a scholarship, which brought me to the University of Michigan, which was pretty off my radar. Like it just felt like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing. There were some teachers I wanted to study with.
Were there any teachers in L.A.? Did you plug into any of the L.A. teachers before you went?
I studied in L.A. with a teacher that I've found through like a local music store. He was just a great gigging saxophone player, and he was a great teacher. He really taught me a lot about tone, and he taught me a lot about just the practical nature of being a musician. Like I would go over to his house eventually to take lessons, and he would be like, okay, I gotta play God Only Knows tonight at my wedding gig, so we're gonna learn this song.
That's great. That is great.
It was a nice way to learn. I was also fortunate, speaking of trying to get out of my suburban bubble, I had a teacher in high school, Stephen Iswardi, who exposed me to some of the things that were going on with the black arts community in Leimert Park, and there's a really rich history in Los Angeles, and I linked up with the then head of the Pan-African People's Orchestra, whose name is Michael Session, and he's kind of like a local, incredible saxophone player, and I used to go over to his garage, and he would teach me for like 3 hours. That sort of gave me real insight into a more aggressive kind of way of playing, I think, rather than this sort of pro-wedding band situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm really glad that you bring up Leimert Park. From an outsider's point of view, I see like all this music coming out of Leimert Park right now that has started to resonate all over the world, and it's affecting jazz and hip-hop.
I was very lucky. The Leimert Park that we're talking about has a deep history. There's a place called the World Stage that is a venue that was founded by jazz drummer Billy Higgins, as well as the founder of the Pan-African People's Orchestra, Horace Tapscott, and poet also Kamau Daoud. And I used to go there growing up and play at these jazz jam sessions. And
was Billy there? Was Billy Higgins still there?
I went after he passed away. But I would go to these jazz jam sessions, and Kamasi Washington, Thundercat, Brandon Coleman, these amazing musicians. They would be playing gigs there or playing at the jazz jams or just hanging out in the neighborhood. They always sounded like that. They always sounded like the genius musicians that they are. And now they're literally on the world stage. And Kamasi Washington was the guy who played saxophone on everybody's gig. He showed up to everyone's gig, you know, and I'm sure he played a lot of free gigs. And now he is getting this amazing spotlight and this kind of platform to showcase this thing that he's always been doing and evolving, and it's just sort of exposing his genius and the genius of Leimert Park to the rest of the world, and I think it's a beautiful thing.
But like in the last year, I talked to Ben Wendell, who's a great saxophone player.
Knee body, exactly.
And Ben is just old enough that he did play with Billy Higgins and
Cool.
described what it was like to be brought into that world and that scene, and Nate Wood, the drummer in that band, also described going down there and to jam sessions, and now these are 3 white kids who were brought into this community. It's a very rare gift to be welcomed into that community and see what it is.
Well, the community is inherently welcoming.
Yeah.
And it's like the education went beyond musical.
Yeah.
The education was like growing up in the suburbs, telling my parents, "Hey, I'm going with my teacher," or I'm going to South Central Los Angeles tonight. I'll be back at like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
At first, I'd fully admit I was scared to go down to South Central Los Angeles. And why? It's because as a white person, you're taught that you don't go to these neighborhoods because they're bad neighborhoods and bad people and bad things happen in them. And it's all racist bullshit. When I went down to Leimert Park, you get out, everybody's on the street. You're walking down the street and the sidewalk, everyone says hello to each other. Everyone's saying, "Hey, what's going on? How are you? Like, how's your night going?" And then you go to the stage, and you walk in the stage, and, like, you just kind of set up on the side and, like, wait for your turn, you know? And it's just, like, there are people of all levels, too. It's not all just, like, Kamasi. There's also, like, there's also the, like, homeless guy that, like, walks in to sing Misty. There's also, like, the equivalent of, like, my dad singing opera. You know, the guy who plays, like, trumpet on, like, the Weekend Warrior, you know, jazz musicians who want to, like, try cutting on Freddie the Freeloader or, like, whatever. You know, it's a mix on those jazz, like, Thursday nights. And it was just a beautiful, important experience to have, just break down my conditioning, you know, as a human. And to just be like, everything that you're being spoon-fed about this neighborhood is complete bullshit. And then to just get in, you know, the humanity of it, just feel like a real human story instead of seeing that there is violence in South Central every night because that's what they choose to report on or whatever. So that was probably just as important as the music.
But that's always the thing they say, right? Like, you know, if you can't convince an entire group of people to change their minds intellectually. You can do it one at a time through like human interaction, right?
Yes.
So that's where your head is when you go to Michigan. You're hanging out in Leimert Park, you're playing the saxophone, you're focused on that, and you get to Michigan and you're thinking, I'm going to blow the world away with my innovative saxophonic contributions.
Sort of, something like that. Yeah, until I hit 20 and realized, do I want to be a saxophone player the rest of my life? You know, it's like, I don't think so. I sort of hearkened back to my childhood and the thing that I always loved to do, which was to play the piano and to sing and songs. And I thought, can I write songs? And I started to try, and I started to listen to every Stevie Wonder record from the 70s and try and figure out how to voice chords. And it led me pretty much to where I am now in a way, because I realized that I did have some kind of talent in there.
Did you feel like you had a more automatic talent for that than you did for the saxophone?
Wow. I've never thought about that. I think with anything, it's how you spend your time.
Huh.
You know, I at least for me within music, and I do think, you know, I was fortunate enough to start studying saxophone after I already had been studying piano for a while, and studying music theory. So it gave me a leg up. And the more instruments you play, the more leg up you get as you start to pick up a new one. I don't really know the answer to that. I do think that I've been blessed with a vocal instrument, and that's literally there's a physicality to that.
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm continuing to develop, because I really don't think that I've reached my full potential with it yet.
Maybe the question of natural talent is a loaded phrase, but did it feel more comfortable to you, or more like you could find a voice, an identity in that?
To be honest, it just felt more joyful in the moment, and it felt like more of a joyful long-term plan.
Yeah.
I also felt like I would be kicking myself if I didn't try.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it, because I did feel like I was developing a voice on the saxophone.
Yeah.
And it was something that I took very seriously and enjoyed doing. But it was more, I guess, the practical day-to-day of that life just paled in comparison to this idea of this other thing that had always truly been my dream.
Yeah. Did they let you said you went on a saxophone scholarship. Did they let you pivot at school? Did they let you move away from the saxophone?
I got my degree is in jazz saxophone.
It is.
I mean, my senior recital was saxophone. It was not songs. Right at the end of college, I started touring with bands, and it's my first time kind of playing keyboard in bands and singing background vocals. And that's where I really learned how to play and sing, because to try and sing in a loud club with a shitty monitor and not hurt my voice. And I hurt my voice a few times doing that. And I finally started to kind of figure it out. And then maybe I would get to sing lead on something. Then maybe I'd get to sort of have my own little side project, play at a small club and try it myself.
Yeah.
And it was just that progression for many years before I put any records out. Before I put any songs out, it was probably 6-7 years of that. Trying to feel confident enough to be like, this is me.
Yeah.
This is what I sound like.
Did you go to San Francisco after college?
No, I went back to
LA.
Yeah, I stuck around in Michigan for another 2 years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had a college band with one of the members, this Theo Katzman, who obviously I play in Vulfpeck with. It was called My Dear Disco.
Yes, I've heard about this band.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to talk about some of this, because I feel like I've been triangulating this story now, one person at a time.
Yeah. Actually, so I left the band maybe 2 years before the band sort of moved on.
Uh-huh.
I felt the call to move back home.
So you, in college, you had connected with Theo.
Theo and I lived together for 3 years in college. Like we were brothers.
Well, and did he go as a drummer originally? He was there as a drummer.
He was there as a
initially?
drummer, but he was so multifaceted and talented in so many ways. I mean, so many people go to jazz school not knowing anything about jazz.
Yeah.
It's sort of the like, I'm not a classical musician major, and that can work really well for some people, and it can not work really well for some people. It's kind of depending on the attitude of your teacher. You could have a teacher that's just like kind of all about it. Like, yeah, it's you. We're going to develop your technique. But then you can also have a sort of teacher who's, no, you're here to study jazz.
Yes.
And that's what you're here to do.
Yes.
My saxophone teacher was like that. He was sort of like a old Detroit bebopper. And he's like, jazz is a religion. Jazz is your 9-to-5 job. That didn't work well with some people.
It was okay for you?
For me, it was great. He was brilliant.
No, I think it's interesting that you and Theo found each other, because you have a lot in common, in the sense that you arrived ostensibly to be doing one thing and did do that thing, but also had all of these other talents and interests that were developed while you were there. And you're both similar in that you're multi-instrumentalists and you're kind of hard to pin down. And what was this feeling like in that apartment that you lived in?
They talk about your formative years. Like, I really feel like I found myself as a person in that situation. We had a amazing sort of house of musicians. And just to sidetrack quickly, if you ask Theo, did you think you're going to be a jazz drummer?
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way he would say yes. I think he thought he was going to be, this sort of soul live John Mayer type figure or something, even though he was so talented on the drums already. The house was like mostly musicians, and then there was one non-musicians, our friend Lloyd. Lloyd had all the records.
Uh-huh.
Lloyd knew more about music and knows more about music than any of us do. And Lloyd is the one that hit me to the band. He's the one that hit me to like search for a new land, Lee Morgan. There was this really like sort of music library within our house. It was also a really encouraging environment. Like, the first gigs that I had singing, it would be Theo and me and 2 other musicians, and we would go play frat parties and sing songs. And they'd be these terrible gigs. They'd be awful, but it really kind of was the first time where I was like, okay, I've got something. Like, my voice is getting a reaction.
Did you understand that your voice might be special and that Theo's also might be special? I mean, what's incredible to me is that both of you are so extraordinary.
Oh,
and you guys are like living together, just a couple of dudes playing frat parties, but both of you, are like rarely, I think, pretty unusually gifted singers. It's a crazy thing that you found each other.
It is crazy. I don't want to speak for him, but we've had this conversation. I think we both really look up to each other in certain ways. I always looked up to him as a songwriter and a singer and someone with great pocket. Was
he writing those kinds of songs in college? Was he already writing?
He wrote great songs in college. There's a few that I would still die for. Like I remember he had a song that was like, try the best you can. It was something like beautiful. People would be watching and like crying or something, you know? And so, I think we all learned a lot from each other and watching each other perform. And it was a very kind of collaborative environment.
Yes. That kind of slight element of challenging one another to rise to the occasion. When you say you both look up to one another, if you're looking up to one another, that means you're both trying to rise to the level that you think the other one is at, which is very motivating.
Absolutely. And there are other people in the scene that we had that from.
Yeah.
I can't believe that I chose to go there.
Yeah.
Michigan was so off my radar.
Yeah.
I knew about Detroit.
Yeah.
I knew that there's this Motown thing. I knew about the Pistons.
Yeah.
But it's like, I didn't really know about this whole Northern Michigan community.
Yes.
There's an amazing Northern Michigan songwriting community.
Uh-huh.
It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's sitting on 1/5 of the world's fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know any of these things, but that community now obviously has become so rich because it's like also Vulfpeck. That's another part of the story.
Well, so that is a part of the story, right? So you and Theo are in this band together. Did you know Jack?
I didn't know Jack until after college. I knew of him right at the end of college. Maybe like right after. I didn't really meet Jack until I was on tour I'd moved to LA. I was like a touring musician now. I'm getting these gigs sort of like as a keyboard player touring with bands.
Like who?
At the time I was on the road with Nika Costa.
Uh-huh.
She's an incredible, I'll call her funk singer. She's unbelievable. And I was on tour with her. Jack was living in Chicago. It was a very short-lived time for him.
Wait, I don't even know about this.
Yeah, Jack was was like, I'm going to move to Chicago and do the comedy thing. Because there's a big...
Wait a minute. What?
Yeah, there's a big comedy scene in Chicago.
Improv, Del Close, improvisational theater stuff came out of there.
I think he lasted 6 months or something.
I'm
You got to readjust your timeline, man.
Everything's... Because, see, I thought that he told me that he moved to San Francisco for a minute after college.
He moved to San Francisco.
Who was there? Somebody was there that convinced him to go there, I thought.
Oh, Rob Stenson.
Uh-huh.
Rob Stenson of Good Hurts.
Oh, right.
Yes. Rob Stenson, who also directed my Game Winner music video and Game Winner remix. Rob is just, and he's an amazing musician.
Makes these plugins.
He's a genius.
Okay, so he's in Chicago. He skipped that when we talked.
But he came out to this show with Nika Costa, and I think, and he loved it. It was, the band was killing, and it was funk music, and that was the first time we really hung out.
Oh, and you had left My Dear Disco, so he hadn't really seen you very much.
We didn't really know each other, but we had all these mutual friends, and but I do claim to be the sort of like, out of all the people in the band and for people in the Michigan scene, like, I will take credit for being the sort of like LA magnetic force to bring some of these people out. And with Theo, I was trying to be aggressive, and I was on the phone with Theo.
Because he was here. He was in Brooklyn.
He was in New York.
Yeah.
For years, I was on the phone with him, just trying to get him out to LA by like very clear means, move to LA, and by very like, oh, man, like it's gonna be cool, like you gotta do what you gotta do, like it's a time for everything, like move, but with Jack, he came down to LA from the Bay, and he stayed with me for maybe like 4 days. We slept in the same bed together because, it's just like in a small little place, and it was hot. It was a hot LA time, 100 degrees, no air conditioning in my place in Echo Park. And he's checking out LA, and we made some videos, like that Marvin Gaye cover that we did, and also the Paul McCartney cover that we made during that time. And I guess Jack was like, "This is cool." And I think I might have taken him to a gig or something, but somehow that time convinced him to move to LA, and they've all been dropping like flies. Everyone's moving out to LA these days.
Well, not so fast. You played last night with Joe Dart on bass. And I talked to Joe last fall in Paris when he was playing. I think he was playing with you. He was on the road with you.
Yes.
Because we tried to hook up, and I appreciate the level of commitment that I have felt from this whole community of musicians that play with Vulfpeck and that are kind of connected to the scene that we're talking about. All of the people that I've talked to have made an enormous effort to be available to talk. I mean, you had offered to talk like at 1 a.m. or something after your gig.
Right.
Remember, I was going to come to your
It sounded fun to me. You know what? You got once you get the seal of approval, the stamp, from someone in the band, we're all going to show up.
That's what I have learned. But when I talked to Joe, he sounded open to the idea of spending more time in New York. He sounded like he wanted to be here and oriented more towards Europe, actually, rather than facing LA.
I think that's true, and I think that's very true for Joe, but I also feel a responsibility to sort of maintain and confirm that Joe is the international man of mystery.
Yes. No,
Joe lives nowhere and everywhere.
He would like to basically have a suitcase and a bass and some
a bike.
sunglasses. A bike? He wants a bike?
Yeah, but no, I hear you. The bike is already like weighing you down a little bit.
Yeah, that's a fixed asset that you might not want to be responsible for. So, but I hear you. The LA thing is a strong pull. And then, so did you know Joe? He's younger, so you didn't know him at Michigan.
I didn't. I'm trying to think of the first. Oh, I remember when I met Joe. I did meet Joe in Michigan. I met him at the Harvest Gathering Music Festival, which our friend Seth Bernard puts on in Lake City, Michigan, every September. It's a wonderful music festival on his family farm. And Joe was playing bass in My Dear Disco.
Yeah.
But we weren't in the band at the same time. And that was the first time that I saw him. I sat in with the band and sang the song that I used to sing lead on. I got to play with him, and I remember meeting him. But we didn't meet until Vulfpeck's second record, maybe, and spent a little bit of time together. And just sort of the friendship unfolding up until now, the continuing unfolding.
How did you get pulled into the fold then? I understand that Jack came down and stayed with you, and Vulfpeck was not a thing at that point, really, when he came and slept in the bed with you.
Vulfpeck had maybe its first record out
at
that point. The first record was out. Vulfpeck was just like, oh, wow, here's this thing that my friends who are still in Michigan are doing. And I was not a part. And then as I became friends with Jack, I think they just sort of invited me to a session or something. It's so funny. I actually don't know what I was just there.
Yeah.
And then I was in. I don't really know how it happened, but
your role in it is, to an extent, it reminds me of Corey Wong in that it started out feeling like it was a kind of a bonus every now and then in these videos. It's the whole world, me included, experiences this in real time as videos show up or records come out or whatever, and it sort of feels like there's this story that's being told, and you get fed a chapter at a time, and you sort of don't know what's going to happen. But one day you open the book, and Joey Dosik's there, and it's like, oh, here's this other character. It's like a community. It's like a family. It's hard to even know who's in it and who's not in it.
Yeah.
But
at this point, I mean, I think for the first half of our history, it was very much centered around the core four from the first record.
Yep.
I think that continues to now on some level because it's just that's the history of the band, but now it's like I think I've only missed 1 or 2 shows the band's ever played, and at this point I'm on the records.
But it goes back to, that's interesting that you say that, because I never understood, what defined it as the core four. It's the first record. The first record is them.
Because that was kind of the spirit of the band. It was the 4 of them as a rhythm section, a German-American, vaguely Jewish rhythm section. So yeah,
nothing vague about it.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah,
Jewish rhythm section.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and this sort of mastermind Wolfman,
right?
Who somehow is like curating the record label that they're on.
Did Jack explain that to you at some point? This is part of what you're getting involved in?
I mean, I believe in Wolfman. I believe in Mushy Krungold. These are characters that exist in real life, In fact, Jack moves out to L.A., and I feel so blessed that so many of the things that happened with the band happened in my house at the time. Like the video that promoted Sleepify was all recorded in my room.
And Sleepify was the silent Spotify album.
Yes, exactly.
That broke all the rules.
Exactly.
And actually changed the Spotify policy, I think, ultimately. I don't think you can do that anymore.
Yeah. Wow. That's a funny way to think about it. Yeah. I think they just didn't want to pay up.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that happened in my house. I don't remember exactly my train of thought that led me there. Maybe I just wanted to flex a little bit.
Yeah, you wanted to just let it be
fans
known
out there. That happened at my house.
It was still pretty early, and you were pretty young. But how did getting involved with Vulfpeck change your career? What were you doing before that? How did you see what you were doing, what you wanted to do, and how did it change after you got involved?
The thing about Vulf is that we get together and do this thing, and then Jack runs with it.
Right, and you have a lot of time.
And it shows up on the internet.
Yeah.
And we find out about it in the same way that you all do.
Seriously?
Usually. And I don't say it with judgment because I'm a fan like the rest of everybody. And so I think I didn't realize it was happening at the time because I remember the time when Vulfpeck wasn't big. What it did was a couple things. First of all, Jack was essentially kind of curating all of our images within the band on some level based upon decisions in the videos, decisions on whatever. I mean, for instance, with Running Away, I had a song Running Away, and it was let's just record this today. But I didn't really know what was going to happen with the video in a way, and it ended up, I think, this massive material on this YouTube channel kind of did curate some kind of image or something. I've never felt beholden to maintain that. It was just kind of a part of my story on some level.
But that's so interesting that by choosing to focus on certain aspects of what you do and who you are. For example, before the success of the Running Away video, you showed up on in a bunch of stuff, but I can remember one video, the one with Adam Levy and Rich Hinman, and then you're playing saxophone in the tape room or something. There's it cuts to you playing.
Oh, that's the one with Jameyer.
Right. Yes. Or in that same series.
Yes.
I don't think it's that same tune.
Same
studio. And you could have easily been guess what? I'm sax man now. I'm going to be that's my new vibe.
Yeah.
But he also chose to highlight this very soulful classic tune of yours and cut it in a very soulful classic live sounding way. And then when you put out your record, it felt very related to that. You know what I mean? It was he sort of primed all of the Vulf audience for this guy, this is what he does, and get ready for it. But you still then had to pick up what he laid down for you to pick up.
Well, I was fortunate enough to pick it up.
Yes.
I don't make my music based off of what's happening in Vulfpeck.
Right.
Vulfpeck is like a super group. I think for a lot of us, it's almost conceptualized as a side project.
That's what Jack says, yeah.
It's beautiful that way. We're so fortunate that Jack has a vision, and I love getting together and making music with my friends, and I love what Jack does, and I learned so much from him as a mixing engineer, as a producer, as a internet mogul, let's say.
Do you, on some level, look forward to a time when you can do an interview and not have to talk about Vulfpeck? I mean, is it okay that it's part of how you're...
For me, it's 100% okay. It really doesn't... It doesn't stress me out at all. It's been one of the biggest blessings in my life, quite honestly.
It's a thing you guys get together for a short period of time, you make stuff, and then Jack runs with it, and then... So even though he doles the stuff out like candy to the audience, right? So there's something coming constantly,
It's candy for me too. I get excited when I get an email from Vulf. I get excited too. I'm excited to see the video.
But the point is, you've got this whole other part of your life where you're putting your own projects together. You're living your own life,
Yes.
So it's interesting that it's so present And it seems like, and Jack said to me, when I interviewed him, it's a trick, I mean, it makes you look very prolific if you don't put it out all at once, but you put it out slowly.
Right.
But you're still making a record the same way we all make a record. It's just that rather than dropping it, once every 18 months, you're just slowly giving it out, in doses so that it seems like there's always something to look forward to.
Right. And I'm not sure that it used to work that way. It's just, that's also the evolution of modern media, where the lifespan of an album and the way that content hits us, it's just here one day, gone the next. It's like, no, that's my album.
Well, I know.
I spent so much time working on it, now it's gone.
You hope albums will stand the test of time. And yeah, I mean, once you put a thing out, it's hard to talk about it a year later.
I guess so. I mean, I guess that's why will your process stand the test of time? That's sort of what I'm trying to invest in right now. I'm just like embedded back in my process after many years of touring. It's like, okay, I'm no longer in the van. I'm now back at my desk, and that's, I mean, in the end, that's kind of the most important place to be, I think.
Yes.
For a musician. Are you grinding? Like, are you creating? Are you trying? Is it good yet?
How do you know when it's good?
There's a couple of things that probably like stand out. Sometimes when it feels silly and wrong, it's really good. Like if it feels silly. That's what happened to me with a couple songs, like Game Winner, a song called Emergency Landing. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this is kind of ridiculous, but it kind of make you laugh a little bit.
I think Inside Voice, too.
Inside Voice, yes.
I mean, that song is a straight up, you can look a girl in the eye and sing that song to, girl, I'm going to talk to you with my inside voice. Some things I can only say to you in a low tone. But it's also ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a thing that teachers say to kids. But you probably maybe said it to your daughter when she's yelling or something. Lyrically, those are things that tickle my brain. Are the things that mean many things. The metaphors, these concepts that. What does it mean? Mm-hmm. And it means all the above. It means whatever you want it to mean.
So that's one way that I wonder, when you have such a beautiful instrument, as my dad used to say, like some people could just sing the phone book and it'll sound good. When you could sing the phone book, it's in some ways it's like you have to hold yourself to an even higher standard, especially lyrically and with a song, and make sure the song stands on its own, because you can make it sound cool just by the way you sing it.
I hear you. First of all, I have to qualify that statement. I couldn't sing the phone book, but Antoine Stanley could.
Yeah.
And just having this conversation, the other thing is you make something as good as you can, and then you play it for people. Mm-hmm. I mean, every person I play something for teaches me something new about it. And I start with friends.
Sure.
Because friends, some of them are musicians, some of them are not, but you can just listen through their ears, just kind of sort of psychically, spiritually, I'll say, put yourself in their position and hear it the way they're hearing it somehow. You get different feeling on a mix, it's just like, that's also probably the most important, I think.
Well, there's always that thing, too, where it's like you've been working on something, and then you play it for somebody else, and the second you press play, you hear what's wrong with it for the first time. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
You've been in it, and you think it's there, and then the second you hear it, as you say, with that sort of empathy of thinking about what somebody else would be hearing, you go, oh, this is not ready.
Yeah, and the more you listen to it, the worse you think it is.
Right.
It's, how do you know something is good? Don't listen to it. I guess that's the other thing, right? It's just like take a break, do something else, get outside, exercise, write a new song, come back to it.
You guys all are pretty healthy. You seem healthy. You showed up with a smoothie. You're into playing sports. It's a good idea to exercise. I'm
doing okay.
What's the routine?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment it feels like exercise and yoga are going to save my life. Just it feels foundational. It feels like so much a part of everything, like energy, feeling good about myself. I've been inspired by the way that Jack and Theo are on their whole food plant-based mission.
I was going to ask you if you picked up on that mission.
To be honest, I fully believe that science. I don't feel any reason to not believe it. I also have my vices / my enjoyments, and I think I love food more than I love music.
It goes basketball, food, music.
Yeah, it probably goes food, basketball, music somehow.
and just some of that just can't be. No, that's not sad at all.
Okay, great.
I don't think that's sad at all, man.
Okay, I'm glad I have your support.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. My wife and I sometimes talk about. I mean, we have dialed it down a lot, but like I remember at one point saying to her, like, if I came home and I was like, I'm a vegetarian now, is that a deal breaker? You know? And she's
what was her answer?
At the time, she was like, no, but I would not be cooking for you as much.
Oh my God, yeah, that's real. I have changed my my dietary routines. I usually cook vegan in the house, and I try and do that as much as possible.
Yeah.
I look and feel better when I'm doing that, but I do both. I love the way that people are creative with all different kinds of food, and I partake. Yes,
right.
I do.
I dig it. I hear what you're saying. One of the things that emerged out of the Vulfpeck experience is that the concept of a community changed because it's happening on the internet. So your fan base happened on the internet, your community happened on the internet, you connected on a different level. And then talking individually to Theo, to Corey, even to Joe to an extent, I got the feeling that like everybody then is left on their own to figure out, well, what do I make of this in my own solo career? How do I take the values that I've learned from Vulf and from Jack and figure out now, but you're in charge of your own career. You know, he's not in charge of your solo career. You have to figure that out. Did seeing how video communicates with people change the way you thought about how you wanted to release your music or how you wanted to communicate with people?
You can't be a musician now and not think about those things. It's all playing out on the internet. In fact, I feel like a conversation I keep hearing is like, have you heard this artist? And it's like, yeah, I've heard them. The music's cool. But have you seen their Instagram? Their Instagram is amazing, you know? And it's like that's kind of where we're at with music maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge that at the moment. I think that's more maybe of a pop aesthetic, but it's also like a hipster aesthetic. Yeah, you can't be making music and trying to build a business off of it without thinking about this online community. I mean, that's where it all happens. That's our main form of promotion. That's the way that people are going to potentially actually find your record and listen to it and come out to your show and be with you in real space.
Yes.
So, yes, Vulf's influenced it just based off of being a part and how prolific it's been. And I don't make video. Corey does.
Yeah.
Theo does to some extent too, actually. Jack obviously is just like game-changing with it.
It is game-changing. It's its own visual language.
I mean, for me, on both records, I'm playing like 80-90% of everything.
So it's hard to capture.
And so that's not necessarily an option in a way that I want to. Like, I don't really want to make the video where it's a cam in the video while I'm playing every instrument or something. And with the last record, I really tried to like enter a few different kind of visual worlds in the music video realm, and was really happy with the videos that we made for the singles.
Yep.
Actually, for the EP and for the record, and it was so fun. It was kind of my first foray into entering that world in a semi-substantial way, not in a prolific Vulf way at this point. But it's so fun to put video and music together, and I've been fortunate enough to have some of my songs in movies, and to go into a theater or to be in an airplane and watch it or like whatever, and to actually see that is a thrill. It really is a thrill, because movies and TV are still magic.
Yeah,
they really are, and the way that music serves it is exciting to me.
And what's your routine in terms of keeping your chops together? I mean, do you put the saxophone in your mouth regularly? Do you try to keep that together? Is that something that's just kind of automatically there for you now?
I never practice. I spend my time doing other things. I practice other things.
Sure.
And a lot of what I learn with instruments is through practical application. Practical application to me is the best teacher you could ever have on an instrument or a craft pertaining to music, and probably pertaining to other things as well. But with saxophone, I just have like, after college, my relationship with the saxophone was a little weird. I didn't get a lot of enjoyment playing it. And outro was the thing that kind of flipped that for me, because Jack was like, yeah, come to the studio, you know? And I was like, cool. He's like, hey, bring your sax. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so I brought my sax and hadn't played it in a long time, and took it out, and that sort of started this new giving zero fucks.
Yes.
If I can say that on this pod.
Say it twice if you want.
More of a punk approach, I guess. Luckily, I still have enough muscle memory to be able to do things, but also like there were other takes that we did of that song. And I imagine that was probably the first take because my chops like tire out pretty quickly. When we go on tour, we did some like extensive touring, extensive for Vulf, which was like 30 days in 2017 and part of 2018 too. And by the end of the tour, I was sounding really good.
Yeah.
I was like, because I was picking up the horn every day just for the show. And, maybe I'd play a few notes before the show or in the hallway because you got nothing else to do on tour. But yeah, my relationship with the sax is very much like there's like 3 people, if they called me and asked me to do it, I would do it.
Right.
Other than that, I have no interest.
But what I really take away from that answer is practical application, which I think applies across the board. As long as you're doing your thing, you don't have to be practicing it because you're doing it. If you're singing every day or you're singing regularly because you're writing songs and you're in the service of the craft, then it's not a theoretical thing that you have to stop and say, okay, now I need to practice.
Totally. I mean, recording music is one of the best ways to get good at an instrument, I think. It's how I learned it's how I pretty much learned how to play bass and drums.
Yes.
Because, I was fortunate enough to be around people who were great at bass, great at drums. I asked people a million questions about things. But then when it came time to kind of like, okay, I'm going to try recording bass on this track, a bass part might take me 3 days to do. But it's like I'm playing it and I'm playing it and I'm playing it and I'm doing it. I'm listening back. When you can listen back and hear what you actually sound like, and then be like, okay, I need to be better at I need to try doing it with my fingernails more. I got to do whatever, and it's like and then to finish, I passed. I got an A. Recording music has taught me more about playing instruments than anything ever has.
And at the same time, you have this voice that you just showed up with. I mean, I understand that you say you're still working on it. You know that there's a lot more there, but you also have this natural voice. And it's a weird thing, isn't it? Like you could work your ass off as a musician, but what people often hear is the singer.
Right.
Actually, Vulf is an incredible exception to that rule because they actually had a lot of success with like wordless, a lot of times just like rhythm section grooves that people freaked out about.
That's true. That are just like ready for a spot on NPR.
Right.
NPR ready. That's true. I will say that I had natural ability with my voice. I started to work on it in my own way. But I've also, over the last 7 years, I've also studied with a voice teacher. And it's opened my world up.
What have you worked on with a teacher?
Oh, man. Vowels.
For example?
For example, I like to think that it kind of all boils down to Italian vowels. Italians have very pure vowels. I've noticed that classical music, and especially the voice, keeps my voice extremely healthy. Keeps my voice strong. People like to think that the voice is like really kind of fragile, and it's this thing that you need to sing like this. But no, the voice is a muscle, and it's resilient. It truly is, I think. And working on what it means to sing an ah, which is an open vowel, what it means to sing a, which is a closed vowel, and make it open, make your ah open. Is it coming down? Does the sound start at your pelvis? Does it start on the floor? Is it an open channel up to your hard palate, or is it resonating inside your chest? Is it resonating inside your mouth, up in your head? Is it projecting? Is the sound round? Is it dark? Is it bright? Doing that on every vowel, learning how to do that on every vowel. That's something that I'm striving to do.
And then also to deliver a lyric or a song, and also deliver a message, an emotional message with people at the same time. That's happening in the background.
Right. That to me has actually always been about the writing. Because oftentimes when I write, it's very kind of performative. It's like when I sit down, it's improvising. It's improvising, and something from the ether sneaks in. Maybe it's just a syllable that turns into this word, that turns into this concept. And I have an instinctual knowing of what I can sing lyrically, where I'm like, this is true. I can sing this true. I've just always had a sense of that, and I'm sure other writers and singer-songwriters have that. It's just like I don't really like to force lyrics. Like sometimes you force it because it's funny, or you force it because it's like, oh yeah, that's memorable. But you got to really like know that you can sing that thing.
And how does that affect your desire, ability to write with other people?
I love writing with people that have quick rhyming knowledge. Like I love people that are writing with people that are fast.
Mm-hmm.
My process is, I think, both fast and slow. I like really love to slave over it and iron out every corner. When I work with someone who's just fast, they've got just, oh yeah, what about blah, 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 blah. It might be 5 terrible ideas, but there's one nugget in there. I'm like, oh, I can filter their ideas through my own sense of what's true to myself, or what I'm like, this works, you know? And so I love collaborating, and with what I'm doing right now, I'm collaborating with a few different people, and it speeds up my process, honestly.
Sure. Well, especially if you get to respond to it. I mean, whenever you have something to respond to, it moves things along. Even if it's something that, as you say, 5 bad ideas, but there's one good thing in there that you could respond to, it's a lot faster than sitting alone for 3 days and trying to come up with one bad idea that you can respond to.
Writing's painful, man.
Yes.
It is painful. I mean, I used to write songs in an hour or two, like full songs, and then at some point, quality control began to take over. And I started writing better songs.
Taking more time to write them?
Yeah, I started writing better songs. It's like truly ironing out, each part. Like it's like it was a poem, or like it was a short story, or whatever. It's like, you get your raw ideas down, you get the nugget that's worth something, and then you try and showcase it somehow. And it's editing and performing and tape recording. And okay, it's starting to get boring here. Like, this bridge should come earlier. It's maybe it needs a pre-chorus, or like, how am I just gonna make this work? How am I gonna get from the beginning of the song to the end of the song?
Yes,
it's literally that simple.
Yes,
right.
When you describe that thing about vowels, it reminds me of something I feel about doing yoga also, which is that you're trying to do things in opposition often. So, for example, somebody will say like, ground down through your feet and be light, in your shoulders at the same time. 2 things that feel like they're in opposition. What I think is interesting is that as you're describing all of these things that you're trying to do, take a closed vowel and make it feel open. Now also take an open thing and make sure that it's like all this stuff that's happening, and be effortless about it at the same time. Like get to the point with it where it feels like nothing, and you almost are doing nothing in order to achieve that.
Or songwriting. Play this song 500 times and sing it each time as if it was the first time you were ever playing it.
Totally. How do you do that?
Desire, joy, actually loving what you do. I guess those are the things.
Yes.
I've gone through periods where I started writing a song, let's say, while I was in a relationship. And the song, I felt like, oh, this is a really good nugget here. And then we'd break up.
Yeah.
And then I'd have this thing, and it's like too painful to even spend time with that feeling. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to throw this song away forever? No. Yeah, I would never throw away a great song idea, ever. I would never do it. It's like, I have songs like that, and I think that they'll probably, they'll come back in a couple years.
See, we started this conversation with you saying that sometimes when you've been given a chance to write a song for a commercial and it doesn't get chosen, you refuse to let that thing go. You say, I'm going to salvage this thing. I'm going to take these drums and I'm going to write something good on top of it. And here we are coming full circle where you're saying, I write a song about something really true, but I can't finish it because it's too painful for me right now. But I know that I'm not going to let that thing get away. I'm not going to let that musical idea get away. It's like musical ideas are important and valuable and rare little gifts. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, is these are rare things.
Yes, because the thing that we didn't talk about is how many shitty ideas I've had, So it's like when you have a good idea, it's like I'm not letting that one go.
Yeah.
I don't have that time to waste. It's like this is potentially important.
I'm of 2 minds about that. Part of me thinks like ideas maybe should be endless. Like there should just be infinite, the more ideas you have, the more possibility for having ideas. So rather than being too attached, because the danger of it, of course, is that you get so attached to something that you're not able to edit it properly because you're so in love with the ideas.
True. Very true.
And on the other hand, what you're saying is, no, but these ideas are important, especially if you like them or if you think there's something good there. Like you don't ever let them get away. Don't let them slip away. You got to keep them close because they're so hard to come by.
There's no way I could ever disagree with that. I think that's the other yoga dichotomy or opposition that we've found here, which is how to love something so much, but also have enough detachment to it to be willing to let it all crumble in service of something greater.
Yes.
And which you don't even know if it's there, but oftentimes you have to try because you got like a B- on it, but really you're shooting for a high grade.
They describe it sometimes as killing your children. I mean, you have to be prepared.
Oh my Lord.
It's a horrible image, but you have to be prepared to let them go because they are our ideas are like they come from us. We've produced them.
It's true, and it is easier said than done.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure a million times I've hung on too long to different kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, Joey Dosik, thank you for hanging on with me today in this conversation, man.
Beautiful, beautiful time. Thanks for having me.
It's been great. There he was, my friends, Joey Dosik, telling the game-winning stories on today's episode. I'll be back again soon with another deep dive. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.